Welcome to my film review of The Curse of La Llorona. Now, in terms of how it's spelt, just to cover this point first, it's spelt Llorona. So, from an English point of view, it would sound like Llorona. But for those who know a little bit of Spanish, two L's together basically means a Y sound. So if you think of Mallorca, we'd read it and say Mallorca, but it's actually Mallorca. Two L's is like a Y. I'm no Spanish expert myself, but just wanted to mention that for people that might not be sure. So it's The Curse of La Llorona. And if, like me, you may know nothing about this movie, I hadn't seen any trailers. The only reason why I went to see this movie is because I'm a Cineworld Unlimited member, and I happened to notice that there was this movie that I was eligible to go and see, where if you're a Cineworld member, you get to go to preview screenings, and that's movies released before general release. And the only people allowed to go and see them are people who are members of Cineworld. So it's a really nice perk, and I try and utilise it as often as possible. And I particularly wanted to go to this one because, what's the date today? It's the 20th of April today, and this movie isn't actually released to the general public until the 3rd of May. So I thought it'd give me the opportunity to get this movie review out there a good 2 weeks in advance of the movie's general release. So I hope you appreciate that, and it'll hopefully give you the chance to make sure that you don't miss it, because this was a cracker. So I didn't know anything about the movie. I only went to see it purely because it was an unlimited preview screening, and also it was a horror. I could tell from the picture, the poster, that you get the little icon, that this was probably right up my street. I love kind of supernatural, kind of horror movies, you know, things that make you scared because of spirits and demons, you know, things like The Conjuring and I guess The Exorcist, you know, go back as early as that. That would be the first movie that really got me into those kind of movies. The Exorcism of Emily Rose, I absolutely love that. That movie freaks me out like crazy. So this, from the poster, looked very much like that kind of movie. So I thought, great, this should be right up my street. I didn't read anything about it. I never do. I'm not interested in watching trailers because often they spoil it. So I went into this movie not knowing anything about it. And my recommendation to you would be to do exactly that. Please, whatever you do, don't watch any trailers, because undoubtedly, as with all horrors, in the trailer, they want to scare you, they want to give you a preview of what's to come in the movie, and ultimately, they'll just give stuff away. So please, 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 don't watch a trailer. Just go into this knowing nothing about it. Obviously, you know that I'm not going to give anything away in my reviews. That's the whole point in my reviews. That's my unique selling point regarding my reviews, that I don't ever give anything away. So I'm not going to tell you anything about the plot, but what I am going to let you know is that if you're a movie lover, this is absolutely a must not miss film. This was a cracker. This really was good. Some movies that I've seen recently that would fit into the horror genre would be not The Exorcism of Hannah Grace. Was it called The Exorcism of Hannah Grace? The one that was out a couple of months ago. That was good. Freaky, you know, really, really good. That was a good one. Us was utterly pants. You'll see my review from that. It probably ruffles a few feathers, possibly, that review. But really, since The Exorcism of Emily Rose, quite a few years ago now, that movie, there hasn't really been anything that's blown me away. And I'm not going to go as far as to say that this has blown me away, but it's come close. It was really, really good. I am so glad I went and saw this as early as possible on this unlimited preview screening. So let's just cover the key points. Basically, if you're a horror movie fan, then like me, you'd probably go and see pretty much any horror movie. Not that many horror movies come out of the cinema. You know, what is it? Maybe 1 in 10 or less. Probably 1 in 20 movies that come out at the cinema are a horror. So if, like me, you love your horrors, you're probably going to go and see this regardless. But if you're on the fence at all, just let me tell you that this is an absolute must. It's freaky. It ticks all the right boxes for me. What I love about horror movies is they're generally about an hour and a half, and this was exactly that. It was an hour and a half long, so you know it doesn't drag on. It just scares you, freaks you out, creeps you out, doesn't waste too much time with storyline and introducing characters, just straight in there with the scares. That's what I love about horror movies, and they're typically short, you know, an hour and a half. And that's exactly what this did. So the thing I loved most about this movie, right from the offset, the reason why I knew I was going to enjoy this, I mean, I could tell it was my cup of tea from the name of the movie. I thought, yes, spiritual, whatever, something freaky, you know, spirits, is it? Something along those lines. You know, I thought this should be right up my street. So I felt confident I was going to like this movie. But what was great was, as with any horror movie, the opening sequence, whatever you do, don't be late when you show up, because the opening sequence is very important. That's, you know, your first little bit of ooh kind of thing. So that's great, but you expect that from a horror movie. All horror movies should do that. But then what it does is, before you even have time to take a breath, it's going straight back in with the scares again. So I actually looked at my clock just to see how long it took this movie to get going. And I don't think it was even 15 minutes before they were right back at you. Straight into it with a freaky. You know, I'm not going to say anything that will give anything away, but you know what I'm saying. The stuff that you go to the horror to see, the stuff that gives you the goose pimples, the stuff that scares you and freaks you out. Within 15 minutes, bang, you're straight in there. None of this half an hour long, these are the characters, you know, that some horror movies do, where it's slowly getting you used to the characters and it's like boring, and then, ooh, a door slams, ooh, what was that, ooh, and that's like all the scares that you get for the first like half hour, 45 minutes. Nah, none of that. This was awesome. Straight in there. Absolute beauty. Loved it. So you get an hour and a half of quality scares. So for an hour and a half movie, this was probably the best value horror movie I've ever been to, because there was no time wasted. It was just, you know, constant freakiness right throughout. Sometimes, you know, it might only be at the very end where you get properly freaked out, but this was, you know, they were throwing it in there right throughout the movie. So I think you will be very, very pleased and very satisfied when you see this. So in terms of how much I enjoyed the storyline, obviously a storyline in a horror, to me, isn't important. I'm not there to see a good story. If I want a good story, I'll read a book. You know what I mean? I'm there to be scared and to be freaked out. But this actually had a decent story. Obviously, the opening sequence sets the scene for the story, and then you find out more about the story as the movie progresses, and it's great. It's very enjoyable. I like it, and obviously, as the name would suggest, it's a Spanish name, so it's Mexico where the story originates from, which is obviously a Spanish-speaking country, and there was quite a lot of Spanish words spoken in the movie, which I quite liked as well. And they didn't translate, they didn't put subtitles on. And like I say, I have studied Spanish, so you know it was quite cool for me personally trying to pick up and understand some of what was being said. And I think most people, you know, there'll be certain words I think most people will understand. So that was quite satisfying. The fact that it had a little bit of a Spanish flavour to it, I found that personally, as somebody who loves Spain, loves trying to speak the language, I found that quite satisfying. And the characters were another thing that surprised me. I don't normally expect in a horror movie to have characters that you recognise, but there was two adults in the film that I recognised from other movies. I'm not entirely sure what. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I was trying not to think about it too much because I was trying to focus on the movie. But I quite liked that. They weren't huge Hollywood A-list actors, but they were familiar, and that kind of felt quite nice. That kind of brought you in touch with the story and the characters almost immediately, because you're like, oh, I know you and I know you. So you felt like you didn't have to spend any time warming to the character and getting to know them. And they didn't waste any time trying to get you to know them. So it was quite a clever use of characters. You know, you had that vague familiarity about them, which meant you could just skip any background nonsense, not interested, let's just go straight into the story, let's get straight on with the action, and that's exactly what they did. So that was nice. Another thing that I really enjoyed was a little bit like Marvel and DC, how they link movies together with characters. They actually did this as well. So there was a trailer for the next Annabelle movie. If you're a big horror movie fan, you probably went to see Annabelle. It's the one with a doll. And at the beginning of this movie, there was a trailer for the next one. So there's going to be another Annabelle movie coming out this year. So I look forward to that. But there was a great little bit during this movie where it actually kind of referenced and linked up with the Annabelle story. Only very, very briefly. And there's no spoiler involved at all there. You know, you'll just appreciate it when you see it. It was a very snippet reference. And I like that. I thought, oh, that's great. It's kind of bringing all the worlds together. And I think it's the, is it the Conjuring worlds? I think they've tried to, whenever they make a movie that's part of the Conjuring world, they do say this is, you know, part of the Conjuring verse. I guess they're trying to do what Marvel have done with horrors. So that was good. So if you've seen all of the Conjuring movies and spin-offs, then, you know, I think you'll get a kick out of that. And this is clearly supposed to be linking itself in there. So it was really, really satisfying in that regard. I quite liked that. And the movie built momentum as well. Even though the movie, to begin with, gets straight in there with the scary, the storyline and the momentum still built in a way that was really satisfying. And then kind of the final third of the movie was very satisfying as well. Obviously, I'm not gonna say what happened, but basically the movie just got kind of more and more gripping as it went along, and I thought that was really well played. So the director did a really good job of pulling this movie together, keeping the pace really good, keeping the frequency of the scariness nice and regular, and it was just perfect for me. This really was a cracker of a movie. So I think that's pretty much all I can say about the general vibe of the movie. So let's go into my key review points. So firstly, to score this out of 10. Now I thought about this during the movie, and I think this warrants at 8.5. Now that might sound incredibly generous, but don't compare this to other genres. This is at 8.5 out of 10 as a horror movie genre, you know? So it's not going to be the same 8.5 out of 10 that I might give, say, a Marvel movie, because that's been judged for different reasons. What I'm judging this on purely is, as a horror, how well did it deliver? You know, it's not a masterpiece of a movie, but as a horror, this was brilliant. A really good effort. So I'm giving it an 8.5 out of 10, which, trust me, for a horror, that is as close to top marks as you're ever realistically likely to get from me, because I don't easily freak out from horrors, but this did a very, very good job. So yeah, 8.5 out of 10, very good value as a horror movie. So in terms of, is it worth paying to see at the cinema? I would say if you don't see this at the cinema, you are crazy. You need to be in the cinema environment to get the most out of this. And equally, I will also add in where to sit. I won't always from now on talk about where to sit, because ultimately it's most of the time going to be down to your personal preference of where you sit. But I have some very specific advice for this movie on where to sit. I personally did exactly this. I was in a movie screen that I knew very well, and normally I would sit at what I would consider the front row of the main block. And that's pretty much as close as anyone ever sits. You know, you never normally get anyone sitting any closer than that, unless it's one of those movies that like sells out and people are forced to sit closer. But on this, I actually would recommend sitting closer. So the closer you sit to the screen, the more in your face and intense the scary bits are going to be. You don't want to be too close that you have to look left and right. Oh, was I looking in the right direction? You know, you don't want to be right at the front, but you want to be that little bit closer than maybe what you normally would, so that the screen feels absolutely in your face. Because then when these scary bits, you know, and you know what horrors are like, they don't show you the scary for, you know, 15 seconds. It's normally just a brief glimpse. You want that smashed in your face. You know, you don't want to be sat right at the back. I mean, where's the fun in that if you're watching a horror? You want to be as close as possible. So my recommendation as a rough rule of thumb is, wherever you would normally sit and feel comfortable for, say, a Marvel movie, where you're close enough but not too close that the action's all blurring into one, but you're nice and close so that you feel consumed by the movie. Take that seat and maybe move anywhere up to 5 rows further forward, and that would be the perfect place to sit for this movie. So please take my advice on that one. You want this to be in your face, and like I say, you have to see it at the movies because you want it to be on as big a screen as possible. If you watch this at home on a piddly little telly, it's not going to be anywhere near as dramatic or as scary. So please, horror movie lovers out there, please go to the cinema to see this, because it's where you're going to get the maximum out of it. And just a few other points briefly. Is it a popcorn muncher? As with most horrors, I'd say no, because with a horror movie, you always need to have those stone cold silent moments for the loud, bangy, scary bits to be as impactful as possible. So there are obviously going to be a lot of quiet bits in this. So I would say no, it's not a popcorn muncher. And to be honest, it's so gripping right from the start. There's no time to be eating popcorn and relaxing. You know, you're going to kind of be like, it's a bit of a white knuckle ride. You know, you're going to be clenching the armrest, or if you're with your partner, you're probably going to be clenching their hand, you know, right from the off. So you're not going to have time to eat popcorn. And is there anything at the end? Well, I actually thought there might have been on this one, and the end credits last about 5 minutes, and there's not a peep, not a thing. So there's absolutely no reason to hang around. As soon as the movie ends, feel free to leave. And in terms of, is it worth paying to see at the cinema? Well, I think you know what my answer is going to be. Even if you had to pay full price for this, because, you know, it's date night on a weekend, Friday night with your partner, and you have to pay full price because obviously buy one get one free in the UK with Meerkat Movies is Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Fine, don't worry about it. Take your partner on a date on a Friday night or a Saturday night, whenever date night is for you, and if you have to pay full price, £10 each, totally worth it. I think 20 quid to go away with your missus or your mister, and you know, to enjoy this horror would be 20 quid very, very well spent. So definitely worth going to see at the cinema. And really, I don't think there's anything more for me to add than that. Obviously, I always like to keep my movie reviews to less than 20 minutes, and we're approaching that time now. So I think I've covered all the key points. This is definitely worth going to see, definitely worth paying full price to see if you're a horror movie lover. And I hope this freaks you out as much as it did me. I mean, I'm not the kind of person that's going to go home and have nightmares about this, but I do like being freaked out while I'm watching a movie, and this absolutely did that. So it was brilliant. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as me. Please let me know, what would you give this out of 10? This is something I want to start adding where possible to the comments section, so that other people can kind of get a mean consensus of opinion, an average consensus of opinion, because obviously my review score might be slightly different to yours. So I'd be fascinated to hear what you give this out of 10 from a horror movie perspective. So please leave your comments, and also let me know what your favourite horror movie is, and what's the most horror movie you've enjoyed recently. For me, it was The Possession of Hannah Grace. That's what it's called, not The Exorcism. The Possession of Hannah Grace, to me, was very good. Very much enjoyed that. What's been your favourite horror movie recently, and what did you think of this one? So thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoy the movie as much as I did, and we will see. Oh, don't forget, this comes out on the 3rd of May, so it's not actually going to be out of the cinema for a couple of weeks yet, but this will give you plenty of time to get excited about it, and most importantly, avoid any trailers. Avoid watching trailers at all costs, because they will probably ruin this movie for you. I knew nothing about it going into it, and that for me was the perfect way to enjoy this movie, knowing absolutely nothing. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next review. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.